Well, this is very much how I see it. It's the attention. The attention is always somewhere at some particular time. It could be it's on some object out there. The attention can be on it's very often on our thoughts. We're not usually aware of this, but our attention is very much caught on our thoughts or caught up in the thought stream. You've got the extrovert people whose attention is always directed out there. Introvert people are people that are tending to dwell inwardly on their daydreams and so on. Neither's better than the other. It's probably better to be an extrovert, actually, if you think about it. Get on with things rather than get caught up in some internally constructed world. So these are the two directions the attention can go in. They can go on external things, they can go on internal things. And the eternal things can also be things which are to do with the past or possible futures or daydreaming stuff. But the attention can also rest in itself. This is what I found when I was looking at Douglas Harding's book on Having No Head. And when the attention is directed to itself, when the attention is the object of its own focus, it's very hard to describe that condition. You've gone beyond everything at that point. It's ultimate. You are directly looking at something which does not fit into the normal objects of knowing. To bring the attention to itself is something you either do or you don't. There's no instruction for doing this. It's something which you either do or you don't. It's something which either happens or it doesn't happen. And once it's happened, you realise there can't be anything beyond this. And the work, therefore, is to do this as often as possible, to consider how the attention is being constantly hijacked, and to direct the attention back to itself. You do this at every opportunity. And this is the effort that is required. Now, we've got this notion of liberation. When the attention is directed to itself, you are liberated from any notion of self, from any notion of the world. But it doesn't last long. The attention then gets caught up in other things. And the attention then needs to be brought back to itself. And I would describe this as liberation as a practice. Apparently there are some versions of the Buddha's Eightfold Path which are actually the tenfold path. And the tenfold path or the eightfold path is a sequence of things that you need to do in order to lead the perfect life. The practices, basically. And the right one, the last one on the tenfold path is right liberation. So liberation here is a practice, which is very much how I see it. Liberation is when the attention is on itself. Right liberation is bringing the attention back to itself as often as possible. So that's where the effort comes in. I would say the effort actually comes after liberation. Now you might decide to define liberation as what happens when that effort is no longer required. Well, that's fair enough. But for me it makes sense that liberation is actually a practice. You can be liberated. The assumption is usually that liberation is a one-off thing, and once you're liberated, that's it. But I'm going to suggest that liberation is a practice, and that is when the effort comes in. That's when effort needs to be made. Effort cannot be made to get to this liberated point. Because as I said, you either do it or you don't. There's no in between here. That step of bringing the attention back to itself is something which either you do or you don't. It's either something which happens or it doesn't. There's not a technique for doing it. It's not something you prepare for. It's not something which you can create a context for. It's not a conditioned thing. It's not dependent on anything else. It could happen at any time, in any circumstances. And once it's happened, once you see what's happened, then you make the effort. Then you need to follow a discipline. Then you need to work on your awareness. But up to that point, you're just shooting in the dark, which is what you have to do, perhaps. So, bearing that in mind, we can proceed